Hello Planeswalkers, Andrew here, and today we're looking at Rhoda and Timin, partner commanders from the Crimson Vow commander decks. These commanders are very similar to the Radiant Knights and their Spren from the Stormlight archive, a series of books by Brandon Sanderson, an author who has guested on an episode of Game Nights. As a fan of the books, I put a few cards in here as references to those books. Rhoda, Geist Avenger, has Vigilance. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is tapped and isn't being declared as an attacker, Rhoda gets a +1/+1 counter. Timin, Youthful Geist, is the true MVP of the deck, who has Flying, and at the beginning of each combat, they tap up to one target creature. This is mostly a Voltron deck, and while Rhoda is definitely intended to be the attacker out of the pair, Timin is a better choice in my opinion, since they have Flying and they tap a creature in each combat. First up, let's look at our pure Voltron cards. Angelic Destiny gives the enchanted creature +4/+4, Flying and First Strike. Basilisk Caller gives Death Touch and Lifelink. Ardent Plea has Exalted and Cascade. Eldrazi Conscription gives +10/+10, Trample, and Annihilator 2. Ethereal Armor is a reference to the Shard Plate in Stormlight Archive, and it gives +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has First Strike. Felidar Umbra gives Lifelink and Totem Armor, and it can be paid into to be moved to another creature you control. Helm of the Gods gives +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. Mantle of the Ancient returns any number of aura and equipment from your grave to the battlefield attached to the enchanted creature. It gives +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to it. Octopus Umbra gives base power and toughness 8/8, and whenever it attacks, you may tap target creature with power 8 or less, and it has Totem Armor. Radiant Grace gives +1/+0 and Vigilance, and when the enchanted creature dies, it transforms and gets attached to an opponent. It is also a reference to the Knights Radiant. Creatures enter the enchanted opponent's control tapped. Steel of the Godhead gives +1/+1 and Lifelink if the creature is white, and +1/+1 and unblockable if it's blue. Trailblazer's Boots gives non-basic land walk. Whisper Silk Cloak gives Shroud and unblockable. Mu Yenling can make a creature unblockable for the turn. Timin's Aura gives the enchanted creature many paid-for abilities. This deck isn't purely Voltron though, and there are some cards in here that will help most or all of our creatures. Cathar's Crusade puts a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures whenever a creature enters your field. Crescendo of War is one of my favorite cards in this deck, getting a Strife counter on each and every upkeep. All attacking creatures get +1/+0 for each Strife counter on it, and only your blocking creatures get +1/+0 for each Strife counter on it. This is the card that let me one-shot 2 different players with Timin on Commander Coliseum. Check out our Coliseum episode featuring Rhoda and Timin for more. Daybreak Coronet can only be attached to a creature with another aura on them, and they get +3/+3, First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. Day of Destiny gives your legendary creatures +2/+2. Felidar Retreat has Landfall. Either create a 2/2 cat beast, or put a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures, and they get Vigilance for this turn. Rogue's Passage can make any of your creatures unblockable. Onto support, starting with Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, who has Vigilance, and its power is equal to your number of creatures. Whenever you attack, for each opponent, you make a 1/1 human that's tapped and attacking that player. Dovin, Architect of Law, can tap a creature, triggering Rhoda. Faithbound Judge has Defender, Flying, and Vigilance. On your upkeep, it gets a Judgment counter if it has 2 or fewer of them, and if it has 3 counters, it can attack. It can be disturbed to become an aura on a player, and it starts accumulating Judgment counters the same way once again, and if it hits 3 counters, that player loses the game. Flanking Troops taps a creature when it attacks. Hall of Heliod's Generosity can be paid into and tapped to put an enchantment from your grave on top of your library. Hallowed Haunting gives your creatures Vigilance and Flying if you control at least 7 enchantments. Whenever you cast an enchantment, you make a Spirit Cleric that has power and toughness equal to your number of spirits. Icing Death, Frost Tyrant has Vigilance and Flying, and it makes an equipment upon death. Ochitai Exemplars lets you choose one whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Tap a creature, Exemplars gains First Strike and Lifelink for the turn, or exile it and return it to the field tapped under its owner's control. Paladin class makes your opponent's spells cost 1 more on your turn. Level 2 gives your creatures +1/+1, and level 3 has whenever you attack until end of turn, targeting attacking creature gets +1/+1 for each other attacking creature and gains Lifelink. Retreat to Coralheim has Landfall, choose one between tapping it or untapping a creature, or scrying one. Scion of Draco costs 2 less to cast for each basic land type you control, it has flying, and each creature you control has vigilance if it's white and hexproof if it's blue. The other abilities usually won't matter in this deck. Sidar Jabari has flanking, and whenever it attacks, tap target creature defending player controls. Subjugator Angel has flying, and when it enters, tap all creatures your opponents control. This can seriously buff Rhoda by a lot. True Conviction gives your creatures double strike and lifelink. Wizard class removes your hand limit. Level 2 draws you 2 cards, and level 3 puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature whenever you draw a card. We've got plenty of defense, such as Counterspell. Dispatch taps a creature, and if you control 3 or more artifacts, you exile the creature right after. Dovin's Veto is a super nay. Dream's Shackle Geist has flying, and on your combat on your turn, you can choose up to one between tapping a creature or making target creature not untap on its controller's next untap step. Frogify enchants a creature and turns it into a 1/1 vanilla frog. Icefall Regent has flying, and when it enters, tap an opponent's creature, and they don't untap for as long as you control Icefall Regent. It has Ward 2. Kasmina, Enigmatic Mentor, gives your creatures and planeswalkers Ward 2. Kasmina's Transmutation turns a creature into a 1/1 vanilla Thanos frog. Keeper of the Accord says on each opponent's end step, if they have more creatures than you, you make a 1/1 soldier, and if they have more lands than you search up a basic plains. Merfolk Trickster has flash, and when it enters, tap target creature an opponent controls. Path to Exile exiles a creature and lets its controller search up a basic land. Sphere of Safety taxes your opponents for mana equal to your number of enchantments for each creature of theirs that attacks you. Sublime Epiphany lets you choose one or more between counter a spell, counter an ability, bounce a non-land permanent, copy one of your creatures, or have a player draw one. Sword of Sinew and Steel gives +2/+2 and protection from black and red. And whenever that creature hits a player, you destroy up to one target planeswalker and up to one target artifact. Swords to Plowshares exiles a creature, and its controller gains life equal to that creature's power. Tangle Kelp taps enchanted creature, and prevents it from untapping on its controller's untap step. Venerian Gold is an X cost that puts X counters on the enchanted creature, and it doesn't untap on its controller's untap steps as long as it has one of those counters, and it loses a counter on its controller's upkeep. For ramp, we have Arcane Signet, Archaeomancer's Map, which searches up 2 basic planes on entry, and whenever a land enters under an opponent's control, if they have more lands than you can play a land from your hand for free. Burnished Heart can be sacked for 2 basic lands. Chromatic Lantern lets your lands tap for any color. Solemn Simulacrum searches up a land on entry and draws you one on death. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. Sword of Hearth and Home gives +2/+2 in protection from green and white, and when they deal combat damage to a player, exile up to one target creature you own, search up a basic land, then put both onto the field under your control. Sword of the Animist gives +1/+1, and whenever that creature attacks, you may search up a basic land. Wayfarer's Bauble can be sacked for a basic land. And finally, for lands, you got Fabled Passage, Hengegate Pathway, Temple of the False God, and Thriving Isle, as well as 16 each of islands and plains. And there we have the Rhoda and Timin deck. As I mentioned once before, this deck has the potential to one-shot players with commander damage, and it also has the potential to go wide if it really needs to. This deck impressed me when I started playing it, and I hope you like it too. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and maybe subscribe. Leave a comment letting us know what you think. And on that note, have a great day, y'all.